In ancient Persia, there was a religion that worshipped time as their god. Zoroastrianism was a belief that time had the ultimate power over everything, which is somewhat similar to the Greek time god Kronos. In Darwinian evolution, time determines what species live and what species die. If you give enough time, new species are born and old species die out. Humans have been around for 200 to 300,000 years, and dinosaurs lived for about 160 million years before going extinct 65 million years ago. Einstein came out with the idea of space-time in his theory of relativity. Even in everyday talk, we often say that time heals all wounds. Time also erodes, destroys, and rots everything. How do we know time? We don't see it, we don't hear it, we don't touch it, yet we know it's there. And the children's story of the elves and the shoemaker, when the shoemaker goes to bed, the elves show up and make all the shoes. When the shoemaker wakes up in the morning, he sees all those shoes but doesn't know who has done it. In other words, we don't know what time is, but we know what it does. Time changes things. Therefore, we only see time when we see change. People getting old, day turning to night, and plants dying. Without change, we cannot perceive time. We perceive time in two common ways, linear and cyclical. Of course, there's also a third one called inner time or vertical, which I will come back to later. For now, let's focus on linear versus cyclical notions of time. Linear time is when we see things heading in one direction towards a destination. Cyclical time, on the other hand, is simply the same cycle repeated over and over. As an example, linear time is like a river starting at a point and ending at a point, A to B. Cyclical time, however, can go like this. When water is heated, it turns into clouds, then rain, then river, and the cycle continues. In a more linear-oriented culture, the origin of something is very important. For example, European explorers spent centuries looking for the origin of the river Nile. In a more cyclical-oriented cultures, people do not obsess as much on the origins of humans or anything else for that matter. Even Darwin, the father of evolutionary biology, titled his groundbreaking book on the origin of species. Speaking of origin, let's talk about the linear perception of time. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, came up with a basic structure for all stories: a beginning, middle, and end. He was talking about Greek tragedies at the time. Today, the same three-act structure works for all stories, from Hollywood movies to literary fiction. Act 1 is setup or beginning, Act 2 is conflict or middle, and Act 3 is resolution or end. This closely mimics life, birth, life, and death. Now, this structure presupposes a very basic notion of time, a linear perception of time that has been manifested itself in science. The arrow of time, which physicists attribute to entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, that as time passes things decay or become disorderly. Aristotle's philosophy is sometimes characterized as being teleological in essence. What is teleology? It means everything has a purpose, a goal. The goal of this video is to educate or entertain people. A pen's purpose is to be used to write things. If you believe in life's purpose, then you ought to achieve something at the end of your life as a kind of legacy. A biological legacy is to have children so your genes can live on. Artists, musicians, or writers, however, look for artistic legacy. Some people leave a company or a building or a charity as a legacy. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving story, Gilgamesh's answer to mortality was to build a magnificent city as his legacy. The linear perception of time is also apparent in modern science. The universe started from a single point or Big Bang, and it's expanding ever since. Even the scientific approach relies on linearity of knowledge accumulation. The aim of science is a search for absolute knowledge or truth, or the ultimate theory that explains everything. Great scientists often try to explain everything with a single theory. Newton's gravity, for example, Einstein's relativity, and so forth. Even as individuals, we aim to improve, to grow, and become richer, to have more followers, more subscribers, more friends, and so on, until we are fully satisfied or perfectly happy. Okay, how about the cyclical notion of time? In cyclical time, life is a circle. You're born a person, then you turn into dust, and then generate into something else, and so on. A good example is the notion of reincarnation in Buddhism and Hinduism known as samsara, which means we are trapped in a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, a cycle that goes on forever unless we reach a stage of moksha or nirvana, a release from the cycle. A more common example of cyclical notion of time is farming. Farmers regulate their lives based on seasons that are repeated every year. Or even in modern work culture, a weekly cycle of 5 days of work and 2 days off is repeated over and over. A more pessimistic way to look at it is like this: you're born, you grow up, and then die. Someone else comes along and does the same thing all over again. Life goes on. You're not at the center of the universe, you're just part of a bigger event. The cyclical notion of time has made it into Western philosophy through the work of Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher. His concept of eternal recurrence is similar to the Eastern notion of cyclical time. Eternal recurrence simply means everything you do in life is going to be repeated perpetually. Since matter is finite, while time is infinite, matters have to be repeated eternally. This means good things as well as bad things recur forever. Even Albert Einstein at some point proposed a cyclical model for the universe, an everlasting universe that never ends, which goes against the second law of thermodynamics that entropy can only increase, not decrease. However, there has been a suggestion that the Big Bang itself is cyclical, that it's also possible it happens over and over. However, today the dominant scientific notion of the universe is more on the linear side. So to sum up, linear perception is that time is heading towards a destination, often towards cultural or scientific perfection. Therefore, it can be characterized as optimistic, while cyclical notion of time means everything is repeated perpetually, so it may seem more pessimistic. Now, where are these perceptions more prevalent? The Greeks after Socrates, and particularly Aristotle, believed in the idea of progress in which society and individuals improve over time in a kind of straight line. Even in Greek architecture, there are no arches or domes. Instead, you have straight columns, walls, and roofs. The Greeks have influenced the West, so progress is fundamental to a Western way of thinking. Today, we strive to get richer, more knowledgeable, and happier. Therefore, people are determined to make things better for the future. If you watch movies these days, the most common complaint among the characters is that their life is a mess because they are not getting better or happier. Society demands individuals to get better, fitter, and more beautiful. In a linear culture, great values are put on growth. For example, despite concern for the environment or negative side of consumerism, everyone welcomes economic growth. Also, innovation in technology to improve our lives, despite the fact that it increases addiction and obesity and makes us lazy. This is not a critique of technology or economic growth, but to point out how perception determines the value of something. If you believe economic growth is inherently good, you tend not to focus on the negatives, i.e. deforestation. The West is also influenced by Middle Eastern religions like Judaism and Christianity, both believing in a more linear notion of time. According to both religions, humans were kicked out of the Garden of Eden onto Earth, which is a temporary place before we head to heaven or hell. As a result, religiously speaking of course, humans are not part of nature or animal kingdom, but a special creature who was given the earth as a temporary shelter. Therefore, it's their job to tame the wild, clean the mess, and control the unruly nature. This has cemented the idea of progress even further, which allowed the West to focus on newer technologies and science to develop the Earth into a better and more habitable landscape, or creating a kind of Garden of Eden on Earth. As I said earlier, cyclical view of time is more prevalent in Eastern philosophies such as Hinduism and Buddhism, and the idea of reincarnation, that death is not the end, but the beginning of another life form as an animal or even object, and the cycle continues. So Eastern philosophies put less emphasis on progress and growth. Today is not better than yesterday or 10 years ago, so the focus is more on here and now, not a better future. As a result, there is less pressure than a competitive environment in a progress-based society. There is less demand for you to change the world or manipulate nature too much. Also, on a personal level, there's less psychological toll on you to improve, get better, and richer. As an extreme example in the West, if you don't win, you tend to lose. In Indian philosophy, humans are from nature and part of nature, not superior to nature. Therefore, animals are seen almost on par with humans, in some cases even above humans. Another example is that unlike Western monotheism, Buddhists and Hindus have no single god or heaven to aim at. One god idea makes sense in a linear perception of time as it is point of perfection, while in a polytheistic cultures, gods or heavens tend to be all around in all directions. Even humans have both good and evil, dark and light forces inside them, as in Taoist yin and yang. Cyclical notion of time is also present in Islamic Sufism, especially in the poetry of Rumi. Sufism, however, has combined progress with cyclical notion of time. For example, as time passes, more cycles come and go, the closer you get to the truth. So every new cycle is an improvement on the previous in a kind of spiral ascent. So to sum up, linear perception takes a more human-centered, self-centered approach. You're important, in charge, and responsible. Therefore, it promotes individualism. While in a cyclical notion of time, nature or the environment are more important. Therefore, it's more communitarian, which also includes all the people, animals, plants, rocks, and everything. In a linear culture, nature is for your benefit, so it's your duty to control your environment. While in cyclical culture, you're part of the environment and you try to fit in. Therefore, you tend to be more fatalistic and less prone to change things. So you change yourself instead. Traditionally, Western culture tended to be more masculine and go-getter or hunter mentality that promoted risk-taking, while the East tends to be more feminine with less emphasis on winning and aggression that promotes safety, in a way more agricultural. Of course, this is generalization. But it's no surprise that vegetarianism has been part of the Indian diet for centuries. According to Buddhists, everyone suffers, no matter how wealthy or poor, and in order to ease suffering, one must not be attached to things, which promotes being content with what you have, so you're less likely to aim to get richer or accumulate things. Instead, you look inward. Also in Hinduism, there are many female gods, which biologically speaking, a woman's body goes through a monthly cycle. So women, generally speaking, of course, live a more cyclical life. In a linear culture, you have to get from A to B. It doesn't matter what route you take or tools you use. In a cyclical culture, more emphasis is put on the etiquettes and rituals. In Japan, for example, the process of doing something is often as important as the outcome. Japan is often described as a good example of a how culture. Even in daily life, most Japanese take their time. It is the task that is important, not the time. But with modernity, of course, time has become immensely important here. Therefore, punctuality is like religion. In Western literature, heroes correct the incorrect, right the wrong. Jesus is perhaps the most famous superhero of all time, sacrificing himself for the good of humanity and the world. Buddha, however, preached changing yourself, not the world, so he left the city for some solitude. Therefore, churches are built in town centers so people gather together in one point, one location, one god. Buddhist temples tend to be in the forests, mountains, away from the crowd. Of course, in today's world, East and West have converged. The East has adopted Western industrial methods, focusing on the output more than the process. Traditions which valued cyclical process more than linear outcome are slowly fading away because in capitalism, speed and shortcuts are important to make money quickly because time is money. Outcome-driven economies are doing better. For example, economic growth is seen as the only measure of progress for many countries right now. Happiness? Only the Kingdom of Bhutan emphasizes happiness before economic growth. They have gross national happiness or GNH instead of gross domestic product or GDP. Time perception also depends on your habitat and climate. In colder climates, time is used to achieve something to avoid the cold winters. For example, chop firewood, make shelter, and collect food. In warm climates, however, there is no rush because winters aren't cold, so time is spent with family and friends. People live slower lives. In the tropics, people can survive without shelter, but not in Scandinavia. It is no surprise that capitalism took stronger roots in Northern Europe, in colder climates than some tropical countries. Is there another way of looking at time apart from the linear and cyclical notions? Henri Bergson, the French philosopher, proposed inner time. In science, time is always tied to space or distance. 1 year is the Earth orbiting the Sun one time. 1 day is the time the Earth spins around its axis. So science cannot measure time without space. Henri Bergson said that the scientific notion is not the complete story, at least not how we humans experience time. He proposed inner time in terms of duration. To understand it, let's look at how science explains time. Scientists measure time in terms of units: seconds, minutes, hours, days, years, and so forth. So for example, 1 second of time today is the same as 1 second of time yesterday. It is fixed. Bergson, however, argues that for humans, time speeds up and slows down. So no 2 seconds or no 2 hours are identical. For example, waiting at a bank, time slows down for us. Having a great time with friends or spending time making a great work of art, time flows faster. So time is like vertical bars or waves, more like a roller coaster than a straight line. A good example of this can be seen in Marcel Proust's novel In Search of Lost Time. The protagonist, while experiencing certain things, a smell, sound, or taste, would suddenly transport him to a moment in his past, so he could experience both the past and the present at the same time, as though time stood still and shot upward. We too have experiences like this when smelling a certain food or listening to a certain song that would take us back to a particular moment in the past. You're no longer in the present or in the past, in fact, both at the same time. Another example is the experience of déjà vu, when you feel you're experiencing something you have experienced already. It's like your memory plays trick on you. You remember the present in the present, but you feel it's past memory. A déjà vu is a memory of now in the now. You remember something that you are experiencing right now. So vertical time is a perception of time as in duration. According to science, time is the same everywhere, solid and uniformed. According to Bergsonian philosophy, no 2 moments are the same. Thus, time is fluid and flexible. Another element of time is language. In Aymaran culture of the Andes in South America, they refer to the past as something in front of them, while the future as something behind them. This is the reverse of how we see the past and future. For them, the words see and past go together. If you have seen something, it's in front of your eyes. Things you cannot see are behind you. Nobody has seen the future, therefore it's hidden from you. I should also point out that in linear perception of time, progress is not always good. Conservatives, for example, believe we might be heading in the wrong direction towards a dystopian future. Environmentalists too see the future as catastrophe. Age also plays a role. Young people tend to be more future-oriented and old people tend to be past-oriented. Age also determines how you perceive the speed of time. For young people, time is very slow. For people over 30 or 40, time speeds up dramatically. According to science, this has to do with the age itself. Young people have lived a shorter life, so 1 year, for example, for a 10-year-old is 10% of their life, so appears a very long time. While for a 40-year-old, on the other hand, 1 year is only 2.5% of their life, therefore appears like a very short time. Scientists believe our notion of time is asymmetrical. It means we know more about now, but little about the past and very little about the future. Yuval Harari, the Israeli historian, however, thinks we know very little about now, but more about the past, as distance allows us to see the bigger picture. We can never see the bigger picture of today because we are inside it. So if scientists think we know more about today than the past or the future, it just shows how much we don't know or how submerged we are inside our own current soup we call the present. In biology, your body regenerates itself over a period of time. Every 10 years or so, all the cells in your body are different from the previous 10 years. Old cells die and new ones are born. But sadly, these new cells are not young cells, but aged versions. So new cells don't make you younger, but instead make you older. Linear storytelling dominates all fiction. All stories have strict beginning, middle, and end. Of course, not all stories are told linearly or chronologically. Today, most stories start with the main incident, for example, a murder, and then takes you back to solve the mystery. The crucial difference between science and literature is that scientists measure time independent of us, while novelists capture time experienced by us, which Bergson tried to explain. Science says time is the same all the time. All the moments are identical. Literature, however, breaks that myth by shrinking it, speeding it up, and slowing it down, and sometimes, as in Marcel Proust's novel, smashing it into pieces. So science says time walks in a straight line, while literature says time is like a roller coaster. Now the million-dollar question, which is first, time or space? In the chicken or egg question, the answer is of course egg. For example, a mother dinosaur could have laid an egg that turned into chicken over time. According to Einstein's theory, space and time are the same, so they came out at the same time. At the same time. At the same time. Damn time. In linear culture, like in the West, time is primary because time is money. If you do the task, you pay attention to time. We have limited time on earth, so to achieve something before death snatches everything away from you. So we have the word deadline. Every summit you climb, you want to do it within a set time. So less focus on enjoying the task or place. In a cyclical notion, time comes and goes, thus the emphasis is on both time and space. So for example, here and now in Buddhism. That's why traditionally people in the East used to be more chilled. In Japanese tea ceremony, you sit down, you drink your tea, you appreciate the cup, you stay in the present. When you go on a hike, you appreciate every rock beneath your feet. Okay, maybe not every rock. Okay, how about me? Since we live in a dominantly Western culture, I see time as my biggest enemy. It's my god. It terrifies me and it motivates me. But the older I get, the more I want to take it easy, enjoy the now and here. Seeing time as cyclical allows you to slow down, which psychologically speaking, you might have a more fulfilling life. I have also noticed a seasonal pattern in my life. I'm happier in the spring and autumn and more miserable in the summer and winter. I write better in the autumn, so seasons have huge impact on my mood and behavior. Also, I don't think that the older I get, the better I become as a person or as a writer. The longer you live, the more chances of a fuck up along the way. Most authors I love them for their first novels. Okay, as much as I try to live my life in here and now, in all honesty, I cannot sit still and be content. I always want to make more videos, better videos, and have more viewers and more subscribers. Having a goal is a double-edged sword. It can motivate you, but it can also hurt you. It's a struggle for me to find a balance. I guess life is meant to be a struggle. How about you? I would love to hear your views on time and how you see it in your life. Thank you very much.